Thanks for checking out this movie review video. So this is for the 2002 French film Irreversible, and yes, this was my very first time seeing Irreversible. It's a film that had been on my list to get to for quite some time because of the infamy of the film, obviously because of that one, mainly that one infamous scene that we all know about, the assault on Monica Bellucci's character Alex. I will say I kind of like built myself up so much that once I actually saw the scene, like it's not a good time and I don't want to watch it again, obviously. But it wasn't as bad as I had prepared myself for. I had prepared myself for it to be like hard to handle. I think also the fact that I had watched Martyrs just a few weeks ago for the second time in my life kind of like softened that blow. Because I will say, like, in my personal opinion, Martyrs is a harder film to watch than Irreversible. Really is. That, you know, that's obviously my personal thing. Although there are a few things with Irreversible that make it harder for me to watch than Martyrs, and that's more from like a stylistic approach to it. But I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. And if you've seen the film, you probably know what I'm referring to. All right, let's get to it. This film was written and directed by Gaspar Noe, who also did Enter the Void, which I have seen Enter the Void, and I definitely like that film a lot more than Irreversible. I would rewatch that one, but I do think it has kind of a similar feel to Irreversible in the sense that it's kind of like this meandering film that's definitely like a lot longer than it really needs to be. Although that one seems more like an actual like story with purpose and scripted than Irreversible does. Irreversible seems just kind of more like, honestly, boring. Like it's for the most part a pretty boring film in my opinion. But anyway, Noe's also done Climax, which I've heard good and intense and interesting things about Climax, and I do want to watch and review that at some point. It's on my Netflix DVD queue. Eventually, I'll get there. Also, the film Love, Lux Eterna, and Vortex, which I think Vortex is coming up or like just came out last year or something. Pretty recent. So apparently a 27 hertz sound was put into the first 30 minutes of the film, and this was actually really only able to be heard within theaters, and the purpose of it was to make the audience members feel vertigo and nausea. Now, the only way I can explain this being employed by Noe is he's a dick. So I understand the point. Like, he wanted to increase people's visceral reaction to the film, but if you're making the film in a good enough way, like that will just happen. Like you don't need to put some like low-level noise in there that causes people to feel ill in order to get your point across. It just seems like a sadistic thing to do, which hence me calling Noe a dick. I think he is a dick. The other thing that's important to note about him, I was reading some articles online about Noe, and apparently in an interview he basically said that like he makes films for him. He doesn't make films for other people. So it's kind of like another like dick thing to do, in my opinion. Just be like, oh, I'm going to put this film out there like in theaters and try to make money on it, but then I'm going to say that the film's just for me. Like, I feel like that's just a way to kind of set it up to be like, if the film doesn't do well, it's just because people didn't get it because it's just personal. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? If you disagree with that, you can go ahead and put a comment down there, and that's fine if you do. Willing to listen. But the dialogue for this film was improvised. Big shock on that one. I'm sure most people, when you're watching the film, get that feeling that a lot of the dialogue is improvised, because there are a few bits here and there that really actually add to the story, but for the most part, the dialogue is pointless. It's a waste of time. Seems like it's just filler. And that's one of my biggest problems with this film is it's an hour and 33 minutes with credits, and there's no way it should be an hour and 33 minutes. I think this is like a 20-minute short film, let's be honest. So anyway, the reason that the dialogue is improvised is because that's the way that Noe wanted to do it. I hate this. Like, I hate when directors do this. Ryan Kruger did this with Fried Berry, but I will say I think overall Fried Berry is more entertaining than Irreversible, because Irreversible, like, even though they both have this element of feeling like they're improvised and being like just a mishmash of crap and not making a whole lot of sense a lot of the times, like at least there were a lot more segments of Fried Berry that were actually visually appealing and fun and interesting. You don't get that with Irreversible for the most part. So, but the script that Noe showed up with for production was like a 3-page script, and that's all they went off of. And the reason that stuff like that really bothers me is it seems lazy. It's kind of this thing of like saying like I am such a good filmmaker that I can show up with like no script, have the dialogue improvised by the actors, and I can get the performances I want. I can tell the story I want to, and it's going to be a good film. Like, okay, I understand that you may have a big enough head that you feel that way about yourself, but do you want people to enjoy this film at all? And I guess that goes back to Noe saying that he's just making films for himself, but I challenge that because is he not trying to have a career? Is he not trying to actually make money? You know what I mean? Anyway, the film was apparently banned in Australia and New Zealand. I'm assuming it was mainly because of the infamous scene. Seems a little ridiculous to me to ban for something like that, honestly. I mean, do I think that a scene that intense and that long with that subject matter was warranted? No, there's no like real reason for it. I think it's very over the top, and I would have preferred that he not have done it because you don't need to see that. You don't need to go through that experience in order to get the point of the film. I assume what Noe was going for with that was to make you feel so gross and terrible and uncomfortable that that would just add to the overall feeling of how horrible everything is with the film, especially since the film is in, going backwards sequentially, like the film Memento, which was the inspiration for doing that. Noe took inspiration from Christopher Nolan's Memento for doing that, but it does make you feel, I think, even worse once you get to the very beginning and you're like, oh, this is how Alex and Marcus started out. Like just these kind of like normal people having, I think a relationship, some sort of relationship. I don't know if it was committed or not, but very much into each other, very much like having a good time. And then at that point you're like, oh, now I know what's coming and it's so terrible. And then in your mind is pretty fresh how terrible that whole scene was. The opening credits are so odd how the letters are, certain letters are reversed in everyone's names. And then it starts like turning to the side as well. I like it. I think it's a cool style thing, especially because it plays into the title of Irreversible, like reversing letters and everything. But also like the skewing of everything just makes you understand that like things are going to go sideways in this film. Like something is very off right from the get-go. But the fact that they then go to like this drum beating sound that's like very kind of, it becomes like nausea inducing to a degree, and it seems like it's just there to cause more anxiety, and like I feel like that alone could just like send people into having a panic attack, especially because it is sustained for so long in the beginning of the film. Now put on top of that all the crazy camera work in the beginning, which is obviously the end of the story. It's unwatchable in my opinion, and if I were to ever have to watch this film again, like if a friend wanted to watch it or anything, I would not actually watch the first half hour or so of the film just because the camera work does make me very nauseous. I literally had numerous times where I had to kind of look away for a little bit in order to like get my bearings again, which obviously I feel like that's another intentional thing by Noe to try and make people nauseous, give people like a physical feeling to go along with how terrible the film is. So like I understand that's what he's doing, but once again, like you're a dick if you're trying to do that to people. Also, it just looks horrible. Like from a film standpoint, nobody wants to watch a film that way. Like you can't see anything. And for the majority of the beginning of the film, you see nothing. So like it's just not enjoyable. So I understand the point of it, but I hate the point of it. Like, the execution is just, it's stupid. There are so many things that could have been done differently with this film that would have made it a much better film. Just saying. The first conversation gets at nihilism, actually, saying that there are basically no good or bad deeds, there are just deeds. And this film in general just has this kind of like nihilistic feeling to it. What's the quote at the end? I'm just going to skip ahead to it. Um, what's the quote at the very end of this? It was something about, oh yeah, time destroys all things. And that's kind of like the crux of the film, is that over time everything falls apart. Over time, even relationships, which is kind of like the main thing, people's lives, relationships, everything falls apart. Time destroys all things. And to a degree that's true, but it's not necessarily true. Like, relationships, I guess, are destroyed at the very end. If they're like a really strong relationship that lasts for the entirety of someone's life, I guess they're destroyed by someone passing away, or both of the people passing away. But, for all intents and purposes, time didn't destroy that relationship. Maybe eroded, maybe even made it stronger over time. But I get the point of it, but it kind of goes to all of that, which is a very nihilistic view of things. Just basically like everything's garbage and everything's going to hell and everything will be destroyed over time. So it's a very nihilistic film. And that opening conversation where they literally say there's no good or bad deeds, there's just deeds. Like, that's a very nihilistic way to look at things, and it sets up the film for people to view it in that light. Just be like, everything that's happening is just happening, and like, life is terrible and life is unfair, and you're just going to witness it as an audience member, and there's nothing you can do about it. So for that way, it is interesting, but as like an actual film, it's not interesting, you know? Like, conceptually, there's some interesting stuff, but in execution, it's not interesting, in my opinion. Where am I? Oh, wow. The abusive, homophobic language in this film is very, very over the top. Abusive language just in general, because there are racial slurs thrown in there as well. And it makes it even worse knowing that it's not even scripted. So, like, whose idea, or who multiple people's ideas were it, or was it, to have this disgusting and negative of a language thrown out there? Now, I do think maybe it was chosen probably by Noe as a way to just kind of throw in like the horror into the horrible that this whole film is leaning, with the whole nihilism and just like deeds are deeds. So like, challenge you with terrible things being said and done, with the backdrop of knowing that like nothing matters and everything is crap and you're just going to have a terrible experience, basically. Like, I guess, but like, did we need that? No, like, it doesn't add anything. And that's the thing, like, especially language like that. And I understand this was 2002, where that type of stuff was more acceptable in film. I get that. Glad we're further away from that. But it's just, it's empty language. It's 100% empty. There's no story being told whatsoever. It's not moving any narrative forward. There's no character development or character anything tied to it. The only thing you get out of it is, oh, this person is homophobic. Oh, this person is racist. Like, that's all you get out of it. And it does nothing for the actual story. So if they were going to improvise dialogue, it would have been great to improvise like an interesting conversation to some degree, like from an entertainment standpoint, or from the standpoint of actually adding to the overall like ethos of the film, or just character development or character relationships or anything like that. Because for the most part, the only relationships you really get are Marcus and Alex, and I forget the friend. His friend, like, you get their relationship, Marcus and his friend, and that's like pretty much it. So there's like no character development for the most part. There's no dialogue that really means, not no, but barely any dialogue that really means anything. So once again, you really can't even see anything, especially during the club scene. You get little glimpses in Rectum, which is like, that's another thing. Like, that's another homophobic aspect of this film for sure. Is just like naming a gay club Rectum. It's just like, are you that unoriginal and like uninspired that like that's what you go for? I mean, come on, man. Like, it just made my eyes roll. But the whole scene in there where the camera work's just going nuts and trying to make you nauseous, you see some things here and there, and I think it's supposed to be like, oh, kind of shocking and everything. And it really does seem that this film's like trying to railroad you into thinking that like gay lifestyle is shocking and something to be scared of, which is another reason why this film doesn't age very well. Yeah. But I understand, like, from 2002, that was kind of still part of a lot of society's feeling, is just like, homosexuality is so like unknown, therefore it's scary. I'm glad well, I was going to say I'm glad we're past that. We're not even past that yet, unfortunately. I'm glad we've come further since then. We still have a ways to go. You can't really even see. I literally just said that. Oh, the other thing about not really being able to see much in the club scene, it's not just because of the camera movement. The lighting is awful too. I like the idea of using like the red color lighting in there, but it's not even lit well enough. So, like, what is even the point of filming while you're in there, to be honest? Like, you're just trying to make people nauseous and, like, see if they can catch a glimpse of a dong here or there, which did happen. I think I saw one. You know what's not entertaining? Just watching a guy walking around asking countless people where someone else is. I mean, literally, that's almost the entirety of the film. Until you get to the beginning of the story, which is the end of the film, which, sets up the actual relationship that was there between Alex and Marcus, which really only the scene in the apartment is what matters as far as setting up their relationship. The whole rest of it is basically just a guy looking for a guy to exact revenge. It's not entertaining. Like, that's not fun. That's not entertaining. Like, it's a super basic story that you get from a script that's only 3 pages. Duh. After all this, if the Tenia, the guy he was after, if the Tenia isn't the best character I've ever seen, it was all for nothing. And yes, it was all for nothing. Well, kind of. Because the fire extinguisher scene, I did appreciate. It is brutal. It does not look away. And just that dude's face just being smashed in with that fire extinguisher. Crazy. That is a crazy moment. I think that was the most impressive moment of the film, in my opinion. Yeah, pretty nuts. Who are these random guys who want to help Marcus get revenge? What is their motivation? That's another problem. Like, these guys who show up after the incident with that, well, after the assault that Alex has had, and Marcus is all worked up and he wants to find the person who does this. Like, there are these random dudes who show up and are just like, oh, we'll help you. Like, this is how we deal with things. We'll help you. You need to get revenge. Who are these people? Why would they want to help this guy? What's their motivation? Like, and this is what I'm talking about. Like, there's no story. There's no character, anything. Like, the dialogue's stupid. It's just like, it's pointless. It's a pointless film, really. Once the assault is talked about, you know why Marcus went nuts with the fire extinguisher, but it does get worse from there, because obviously the infamous scene. Notice in the infamous scene that a guy walks into the tunnel and then walks back the way he came, which is pretty messed up. That's a messed up moment. I actually kind of, like, chuckled slightly when I saw him come in and then, like, leave. Like, the way it was done seemed a little funny at the time. But then, like, I was just like, oh, that's really messed up, though. And I think, it's kind of a bit of a commentary on society of there are people who would be that way. Like, people who are literally, like, walk into a situation like that and be like, oh, this isn't my business. I'm leaving, instead of helping the situation. So, yeah, pretty crazy. So what's the point here? Just to see how over the top you can get. That's what that infamous scene seems like. Now, I will say, from what I read, Noe had said that he left it up to the actors in that scene to take it to whatever length they wanted to, and apparently they worked really well together and they were very comfortable with each other, so much so that they would let it go and go and go because they really had trust in each other. And apparently they filmed that scene a few times, and they, like, made it worse and, like, made it go longer as it went on. So, like, I'm more okay with the scene if it was literally up to the actors, but I'm going to guess that's not the case, especially with the type of public stuff Noe has said versus what things really seem like. But, yeah, if that makes any sense. The party scene might be the best part of the film, other than the fire extinguisher, but even then it's just so meandering and keeps repeating that it's not actually entertaining. There's a lot of repetition in this film. And it's just, yeah, just like them meandering, like, hey, you just want to, like, follow a dude at a party? It's kind of entertaining for a little bit, but then when it keeps going on, it's not entertaining anymore because you're not advancing the story. The reason people watch movies typically is to experience a story. Now, if the story is very simplistic, you should cut it down and not waste people's time. And certainly don't try to make them sick with crazy camera movements and 27 hertz noise. Noise a dick. You do see how things could have gone differently based on just a small thing if Marcus had been more courteous to Alex when they were at the party itself, because then that's when she kind of goes off by herself. And at that moment, it does make the impact of running the story in reverse more impactful. So I like that aspect of it. I mean, see, there are things I liked about the film. So, because it lets you know, like, oh man, like it makes the audience member think, oh, this, if he could have just done this one thing differently, it could have avoided everything. And that's doing the story in reverse really sets you up to think more in that line of thought. When Alex talks about the idea of everything being predestined, that was, I think, on the subway, the audience kind of shakes their head because they know what that means for her. Her talking about things being predestined then says to the audience that what happens to her was a predestined thing, which is pretty messed up. But that goes with the whole thing of, time destroys everything. The film does work better in reverse because you see the happiness of Marcus and Alex, but can't stop thinking about the horrible descent that you know is coming in their story timeline. You've already been there as an audience member, but you know that's where they are headed. So it's this kind of like weird thing where you're like crossing paths and you're like, don't go that way. I know what happens if you do. You know what I mean? So in that sense, that's cool. That is interesting. It's just, I wanted a more structured actual story to it with fleshed out characters, with actual character development, with dialogue that actually means more to the actual story that's going on. It's too simplistic. Like, don't show up with a 3-page script and be like, well, it provides stuff. I hate it. The pregnancy twist. Lazy. Pregnancy twists in films. Almost always lazy. 3-page script. There you go. I hate when people use that stuff. It's a way to try and pull at people's heartstrings a little bit more. They're like, oh, we're going to make it even so much worse. And that's what they were going for right there. Noe was going for people being like, well, it was horrible what happened to her. And then they're like, oh my God, and she was pregnant on top of that. Oh my gosh. To me, I just rolled my eyes and I'm like, really? Literally one of the laziest things you can do in writing a script is like bringing in pregnancy or a kid in peril. Come on, dude. Cheap. I do like the ending with the camera looking down from above and all the really cool colors against the kind of grass, and Alex was laying there. So it kind of gives, it's the beginning of the story, but it kind of gives like a nicer ending to the film for the audience. It's like a quick palate cleanser in a sense. But then, as we all know if you watch long enough, Noe tries to give the audience a parting seizure with that white blinking screen. Again, trying to physically induce stuff in audience members and not through the story, not through the dialogue, not through the characters, like just trying to do other stuff. Like, come on now. But then when it says in the end, time destroys all things, that was kind of the point of the film. And you understand that at that point as an audience member. This film is obviously longer than it needs to be because of Noe's meandering film style. Not a fan. There's a very simplistic story here that tries to trick you into thinking it's more interesting than it is by showing the events backwards. Yes, that is one of the things, because it makes it more of like a mystery. So it makes the story a little bit more interesting. Think about this film if it was literally run sequentially, as it actually happened. I think people would enjoy it even less, let's be honest. So it did benefit this crappy film by going backwards. Have you ever wanted to feel like you were just assaulted by a filmmaker? After watching Irreversible, you have. And I'm not talking about the infamous scene, really. I'm talking about all the other things he did with like the wacky camera work and the bad lighting and the noises and yeah, like that's the type of assault. Yeah. Also, the last thing to say about this, there's no way a film like this gets made nowadays, and I am very much good with that. I am so okay with that for all the reasons I laid out that I don't like this film. So, I understand there are probably people out there who see a lot more in this film and appreciate a lot more about it. So, for that reason, I am totally down to hear from you. Give me your explanations. What do you like about it? Go ahead and put it in the comments. Out of 5 stars with half stars in play, there is some stuff that's legitimately accomplished with this film, but I can't go too crazy. I'm going to give this 1.5 stars. That's the best I can do. I thought about 2 stars, but it's not good enough. Like, I 1.5 stars. It's not a good film, really. And I would never watch it again. And when I talked to people prior to seeing it, I thought that people were saying they wouldn't watch it again because of the infamous scene. But now after seeing it, I think it's way more than that. I don't think it's as much the infamous scene as it is just how the film is pulled off. Like, it's boring and they do all this wacky stuff to you. So, not into it. Anyway, comments, let's talk about it. Do me a quick favor, hit subscribe if you haven't already. That is your way to repay me if you like this video or any video I've ever done. It is quick, it is painless, it costs you $0, and I appreciate it greatly. It literally motivates me to keep this stuff going. I'm 100% serious on that. Also, hit the notification bell button because you'll know then when I'm putting up new videos, which I'm doing 4 a week, and they are like on a normal schedule. It's I'm doing, depending on how you like your week to go. I go Monday to Sunday. Some people go Sunday to Saturday, but Mondays I put them out, Wednesdays, and then Saturday, Sunday. So, yeah. But regardless, I really do thank you for taking your time to watch this video, and until next time, keep it brutal.